bit in the ancient land of Israel. The sun was a relentless fire in the sky. It beat down on dusty fields and cracked earth. But it was not the land's greatest trouble. A deeper shadow had fallen over the people, and it was a shadow cast by the king himself. King Ahab ruled from a palace of great splendor, but his heart was far from God. At his side was Queen Jezebel, a woman of powerful will. Together, they had brought the worship of a false god, Baal, to the land, turning the people away from their true faith. Far from the gilded halls of the palace, a man named Elijah walked the barren hills. He was a simple, solitary prophet, with a worn robe and a beard touched by the wind. He saw the suffering of the people and the sin of their leaders, and he prayed for a sign from God. One day, as he knelt in the quiet wilderness, a powerful voice spoke to him, clear as a bell. The voice was that of the one true God, and it gave him a mission. Elijah was to go to the palace and deliver a message to King Ahab, a message that would change everything. With newfound strength, Elijah went to the palace. He stood before the king, unbowed and unafraid. He looked Ahab in the eye and declared that because of their wickedness, the heavens would close. Not a single drop of rain or dew would fall until Elijah commanded it. King Ahab was furious, but Elijah did not stay to face his wrath. Just as God had instructed, he turned and fled. His destination was a small, hidden place, the brook of Cherith, a small stream where God would provide for him in the coming drought. The days turned into weeks. The land grew dry, and the sun scorched the earth. Yet, at the brook of Cherith, Elijah was cared for. Every morning and every evening, a group of ravens arrived, carrying bread and meat, a miracle that showed God's faithfulness in a time of great need. But as the drought continued, even the steady brook began to shrink. The water, which had been Elijah's lifeline, became a mere trickle. The time had come for Elijah to move on, for God had a new plan for him in a new place. Elijah journeyed to the town of Zarephath. As he entered the city gates, he saw a poor widow gathering sticks. She was preparing to make the very last meal for herself and her son before they faced the famine. Elijah approached her with a strange request. The prophet asked the widow for a drink and a small loaf of bread. She told him that she had only a handful of flour and a little oil. But Elijah promised her that if she trusted in God, her jar of flour and jug of oil would never run out. With faith, she did as he said, and the miracle began. As the long, dry months passed, the widow's house became a haven of peace and provision. Her jar of flour was never empty, and the jug of oil was always full. It was a constant reminder of God's power and Elijah's promise, proving that faith could flourish even in the driest of times. But one day, a new kind of darkness entered the small home. The widow's son, her greatest joy, fell gravely ill. His fever burned like the sun outside, and his breath grew shallow, leaving his mother to watch over him with a heart full of fear. The sickness took hold, and the boy's strength faded. The mother, helpless and heartbroken, held her son as his young life slipped away. Her sorrow was a painful cry against the injustice of it all. A cry for the son she had almost lost to the famine, and had now lost to a new sorrow. The grieving mother, in her anguish, turned to Elijah. "What have you done to me, man of God?" she cried. "Did you come here to remind me of my sins, and to kill my son?" The burden of her grief twisted her words into a bitter accusation. a question born of pain and despair. Elijah's heart was heavy with the woman's pain. He did not defend himself. Instead, he simply asked her to give him her son. He carried the lifeless boy up the stairs, away from the weeping mother, to the quiet room where he slept, lying the boy on his own bed. Elijah cried out to God in his distress. "O Lord, my God," he pleaded, "have you brought tragedy to this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die?" It was a desperate prayer, a raw appeal for mercy, and a cry for the boy's life. Then, Elijah stretched himself out on the boy's body 3 times, praying to the Lord again. "O Lord, my God," he cried, "let this boy's life return to him." He was not just a man praying, but a messenger of God, acting in faith with every breath. Baal. And the Lord heard the voice of Elijah. The boy's spirit returned to him, and he began to breathe. Life flowed back into his body, the color returning to his cheeks. The boy's eyes fluttered open, and he sat up on the bed. The miracle was complete. Elah brought the boy down to his mother, his heart soaring with joy. "Look," he said, "your son is alive." The widow took her son into her arms, weeping tears of relief and a wonder so profound that it was beyond words. Her sorrow was replaced by a joy that was a taste of heaven. The widow, her faith renewed and strengthened by this incredible event, looked at Elijah with a new light in her eyes. "Now I know," she said, "that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." The famine continued, and the earth remained parched, but the time of hiding was ending. The Lord spoke to Elijah once more, telling him that it was time to leave the widow's house and to go back to King Ahab. "Go, present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land." The stage was set for the next great act. Meanwhile, back in Israel, King Ahab was on a desperate search for water with his faithful servant Obadiah. Obadiah, a man who feared God, had hidden and fed 100 of the Lord's prophets from the wicked queen Jezebel. The king sent Obadiah in one direction while he went in another. As Obadiah walked, he saw a familiar figure in the distance. It was Elijah. Filled with a mixture of fear and reverence, Obadiah fell to the ground and asked, "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" Elijah confirmed that it was he, and he gave Obadiah a command. "Go, tell your master, Elijah is here." But Obadiah was terrified. He feared that as soon as he left, the Spirit of the Lord would carry Elijah away, and Ahab would kill him for lying. Elijah swore to Obadiah that he would indeed show himself to the king that very day. Reassured by the solemn promise, Obadiah left, his heart pounding with both fear and hope. He found King Ahab and delivered the message that the prophet had returned. King Ahab rushed to meet Elijah. When he saw him, he asked with a scowl, "Is it you, the troubler of Israel?" Ahab's pride was on display as he blamed Elijah for the suffering caused by the drought. Elijah stood firm and faced the king's accusation head-on. "I have not troubled Israel," he said, "but you and your father's house have, by abandoning the Lord's commands and following the false god, Baal." It was a bold and direct confrontation, a clear declaration of the real problem. The prophet then proposed a contest. "Now, send for all of Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table." The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. A great multitude of people gathered on Mount Carmel. It was a silent sea of faces, filled with anticipation and uncertainty. They watched as Elijah, a single man, stood alone against the 850 prophets of Baal and Eliad addressed the people. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. The people were silent. They had no answer, and their silence spoke volumes about their divided hearts. Elijah turned to the prophets. I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but there are 450 of Baal's prophets. Let 2 bulls be given to us. Let them choose one for themselves. Cut it into pieces, and lay it on the wood, but do not light the fire. Then Elijah declared, You call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God. It was a simple yet powerful test, designed to reveal the truth to everyone present. The prophets of Baal accepted the challenge. They took their bull and prepared it. They laid it on the wood and began to call out to their God from morning until noon. O Baal, answer us, they cried, their voices growing more desperate with each passing moment. The minutes turned into hours, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The prophets of Baal danced and shouted, but there was no voice, no answer, no fire. The air was filled with a deafening silence. As noon passed, Elijah began to mock them. Shout louder. He said, Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. His words were a biting commentary on the futility of their worship. The prophets of Baal, desperate and frantic, began to cut themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom. They were a mass of blood and fury, but their God remained silent. They raved and prophesied until the time of the evening sacrifice, but there was still no reply. As the sun began to sink low in the sky, Elijah called out to the people, Come here to me, he commanded. The crowd, silent and curious, drew near, and Elijah began to repair the broken altar of the Lord, a sacred place of worship that had been cast aside. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes of Israel, and with them he rebuilt the altar. It was a physical symbol of the nation's true identity and a reminder of God's covenant with his people, a covenant that had been neglected for too long. He then dug a deep trench around the altar and laid the wood in place. He cut up the bull and laid its pieces on the wood, a perfect sacrifice, just as the prophets of Baal had done. The scene was set, but what Elijah did next would prove the power of his God. Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. He instructed the people. The people, in their thirst, must have been shocked. Why waste precious water? But they obeyed, pouring the liquid over the dry wood until it was completely soaked. Do it again, Elijah commanded. The people did it a second time, and the water flowed down the sides of the altar, seeping into the ground. A collective gasp went through the crowd as they saw more of their precious resource being used for this strange display. Do it a third time, Elijah said. And a third time they poured the water until it ran down all over the altar and filled the trench around it. The altar was a soggy, dripping mess. It seemed impossible that a fire could ever be lit here. With the sacrifice, the wood, and the altar completely soaked, Elijah stepped forward. He raised his hands to heaven and prayed a simple, humble prayer. O Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Pursuit. As soon as Elijah finished his prayer, the fire of the Lord fell from heaven. It was a brilliant, consuming light that descended with a roar. It was not a small fire, but a raging inferno that swallowed everything in its path. The fire consumed not only the burnt offering, but also the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up the water in the trench, leaving nothing behind but scorched earth. The impossible had happened. When all the people saw this, they fell on their faces in a mixture of awe and fear. They had witnessed a miracle that could not be denied. Their doubts were replaced with a clear and certain truth. In a single, unified voice, the people shouted, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" It was a powerful confession of faith, a return to the truth that they had lost for so long. Elijah then turned to the people and commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let a single one escape." The people, now full of zeal for God, did as they were told, and the prophets were taken to the Kishon Valley to face the consequences of their actions. Elijah approached King Ahab and said, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." Ahab, who had witnessed the incredible spectacle, went down to eat and drink. But Elijah, filled with a new energy, had work to do. Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, to the highest peak. He bowed down to the ground and put his face between his knees, a position of deep and humble prayer. He then told his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." The servant went and looked, but when he returned, he reported, "There is nothing." Elijah's command was firm, "Go back." The servant went and looked 7 times. Each time he returned with the same report. Still, Elijah did not waver. His faith was a rock, unmoving and certain. The 7th time the servant returned, he had a different report. A small cloud, the size of a man's hand, is rising from the sea. It was a tiny sign, a small whisper of a promise. But for Elijah, it was everything. Elijah told his servant, "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Ahab did as he was told. But as the sky grew dark, Elijah, filled with God's power, ran ahead of the king's chariot all the way to in the palace at Jezreel. King Ahab told Queen Jezebel all that Elijah had done. How he had called down fire from heaven and killed her prophets. Jezebel's rage was a force as terrible as the fire itself. In her fury, Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah with a chilling message. "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." It was a promise of death, a vow to avenge her fallen prophets. Elijah, who had stood fearless before a king and a mountain of false prophets, was now filled with terror. He had just witnessed the power of God, but the very real threat from a powerful queen shattered his resolve. He immediately rose and ran for his life. He fled from the town and into the wilderness, seeking to put as much distance as possible between himself and Jezebel's wrath. He was no longer a courageous prophet, but a man in a desperate fight for survival, exhausted and alone. He came to a lone broom tree. He sat down in its small patch of shade and felt the full weight of his despair. He was no longer a man of faith, but a man who had lost all hope. Elijah cried out to God in his desperation. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." It was a raw, honest plea from a man who had given everything and now had nothing left. Baz! Elijah fell asleep. An angel of the Lord appeared and touched him. The angel told him, "Get up and eat." Elijah awoke and saw a cake of bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water by his head. He ate and drank and lay down again. Second time the angel returned and touched him. "Get up and eat," he said, "for the journey is too much for you." Elijah, revitalized by the food and water, arose with newfound strength. The simple meal was a divine provision that sustained him. Strengthened by the food, Elijah traveled for 40 days and 40 nights, walking through the vast, empty wilderness. His journey led him to Mount Horeb, the same mountain where Moses had spoken to God. He found a cave and entered it, seeking shelter and answers from the God he had served so faithfully. As he sat in the cave, the word of the Lord came to him. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" the voice asked. It was a gentle question, a call to account for the fear that had driven him to this place. Elijah poured out his heart to God. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty," he said. "The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." God then gave Elijah a new command. "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Elijah, though still fearful, obeyed. A great and powerful wind ripped through the mountains, a furious gale that shattered rocks. But the Lord was not in the wind. It was a display of power, but not a symbol of his presence. After the wind, there was an earthquake. The ground trembled and the mountains groaned. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. It was a testament to his might, but not his spirit. After the earthquake, a fire came. It was a raging, consuming flame that lit up the darkness. But the Lord was not in the fire. It was a terrifying display of his power, but not the answer Elijah was looking for. After the fire, there was a gentle whisper. It was a quiet, almost silent sound. But when Elijah heard it, he knew it was the voice of God. He wrapped his cloak round his face and went to the mouth of the cave. The gentle whisper spoke again, asking the same question. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" This time, the question was filled with compassion, and Elijah repeated his complaint, his heart laid bare. But God did not dwell on Elijah's fear. He gave him 3 new commands. Anoint Hazael as king of Aram, anoint Jehu as king of Israel, and anoint Elisha as his successor. The prophet's work was not over. It was just beginning a new chapter. Elijah left the mountain and journeyed until he found Elijah. Elijah was in a field, plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. He was a wealthy farmer, a man of prosperity, but his life was about to change forever. Without saying a word, Elijah walked by Elisha and threw his cloak, his mantle, over him. It was a simple, silent act, but it was a powerful symbol. It was a call to a new life, a new purpose, and a new destiny. Elisha immediately left his oxen and ran after Elijah. "Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye," he pleaded, "and then I will come with you." Elijah's response was simple. "Go back. What have I done to you?" The choice was Elisha's alone. Elisha, with his choice made, took his oxen, slaughtered them, and used his plowing equipment as firewood. He gave the meat to the people and then followed Elijah. It was a final farewell to his old life, a symbol of his complete commitment to his new path. Time passed, and the prophet's path crossed with King Ahab once more. Ahab had come to covet a beautiful vineyard owned by a man named Naboth, which was right next to his palace. He offered to buy it or trade for it, but Naboth refused. The king returned to his palace, angry and sullen. He lay on his bed, refusing to eat. Queen Jezebel, seeing his despair, came to him and asked, "Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?" When Ahab told her about Naboth, Jezebel laughed. "Is this how you rule Israel?" She sneered. "Just get up and eat. I will get you Naboth's vineyard." She then forged letters in the king's name, ordering a fake trial and the death of Naboth. 2 false witnesses accused Naboth of cursing God and the king. The elders of the city, afraid of the queen, followed her orders. Naboth was taken out of the city and stoned to death. When Jezebel learned that Naboth was dead, she told Ahab, "Get up and take possession of the vineyard." Ahab did just that, walking into the very field that had been so unjustly taken. But as soon as he entered, a voice spoke to Elijah. "Go down to meet Ahab in Naboth's vineyard," it commanded. "Because you have sold yourself to do evil, I am going to bring disaster on you and your family." Elijah appeared before Ahab, a figure of vengeance and truth. "Have you found me, my enemy?" Ahab said. "I have found you," Elijah replied, "because you have sold yourself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord." Elijah delivered the terrible prophecy. Dogs would lick Ahab's blood, just as they had licked Naboth's, and Jezebel too would be eaten by dogs, a gruesome end for the wicked queen. Ahab, faced with this terrible news, was truly humbled. He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and fasted. He walked around in a show of deep sorrow, and God, seeing his repentance, promised that the judgment would not fall in Ahab's lifetime. Years passed, and the time for Elijah to leave this world grew near. He and Elisha journeyed together from Gilgal, with Elijah trying to get Elisha to stay behind. "Stay here," he said, "for the Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha refused to leave him. As they reached the Jordan River, Elijah took his cloak and rolled it up. He struck the water with it, and the river parted, allowing them to cross on dry ground. It was the same miracle God had done for Moses and Joshua, a powerful symbol of the prophet's power. As they walked, Elijah asked Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha, filled with a deep desire to continue his master's work, replied, "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." Elijah's response was both a promise and a challenge. "You have asked a difficult thing, but if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours." As they continued to talk, a chariot of fire, pulled by horses of fire, appeared out of nowhere. The chariot swept between the 2 men, and a powerful whirlwind took Elijah up into heaven. Elisha watched, his heart filled with both sorrow and a profound sense of awe. Elisha, in his grief, cried out, "My father, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." He then tore his own clothes in 2 and picked up Elijah's cloak, which had fallen to the ground. The sign had been given. He went back to the Jordan River and struck the water with Elijah's cloak, just as his master had done. "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" he asked. The waters parted, and Elisha walked across on dry ground. His journey as the new prophet had begun. The end.